There is a moment in the narcissist's story when the mask can no longer hold. The carefully constructed image, the illusion of superiority, the performance of perfection, all begin to tremble beneath the weight of reality. It happens quietly at first, almost imperceptibly. A crack in the facade, a silence that no longer feeds them, a reflection that no longer obeys. The collapse of the false self does not occur through confrontation, but through starvation, when the emotional supply that sustains the illusion is withdrawn. The narcissist survives by reflection. They borrow identity through your reactions, your attention, your emotional labor. Every compliment, every argument, every ounce of validation serves as psychic oxygen to the false self, that grand, inflated persona created to hide the emptiness underneath. This self is not real. It is a mask stitched together by fragments of admiration and control. Without constant feeding, it begins to rot from within. The moment you stop providing that energy, the decay becomes inevitable. In the early stages of collapse, confusion sets in. The narcissist senses that something is wrong but cannot name it. Their usual tactics, manipulation, guilt, seduction fail to evoke the same response. It is as if their reflection in the mirror has gone still. Panic seeps through the cracks of their control. Because the false self cannot exist without external recognition, the absence of your attention feels like psychological death. They feel unseen, and to them, that is annihilation. Behind the scenes, their inner world becomes a battlefield. The grandiose image they've spent years maintaining collides with the truth of their dependency. Their ego insists, I am powerful, desired, untouchable, while the deeper self whispers, I am nothing without them. This inner contradiction grows unbearable. The narcissist begins to swing between arrogance and despair, boosting one moment, collapsing the next. It's not strength or weakness you're witnessing, it's the breakdown of illusion. As the mask weakens, the repressed emotions beneath it start to surface: shame, fear, inadequacy, envy. These feelings were always there, but the narcissist projected them onto others to avoid facing them. When projection fails, they are forced to encounter the very emotions they've denied all their life. They see, for a fleeting moment, the emptiness they've been running from, a hollow core that no amount of admiration can fill. The collapse of the false self is not a moral punishment, it is psychological consequence. No structure can survive when built upon denial. The narcissist often responds to this collapse with rage. Not the loud, explosive kind, though that too can appear, but a deeper existential rage born of exposure. They rage because the illusion of control has vanished. They rage because their reflection no longer worships them. They rage because the image they've created, the superior, adored version of themselves, is dying, and they cannot stop it. This rage is not directed at you, though you may feel its force. It is the scream of the false self facing its own extinction. Beneath that rage lies a terror few can understand, the terror of meaninglessness. The narcissist has built their identity around external validation. Without it, there is no inner compass, no stable sense of I. When you detach, when you stop explaining, defending, or rescuing, you force them to meet the void within. They search desperately for new sources of supply, new mirrors to reflect their false greatness, but the emptiness follows them. The collapse has already begun. At this stage, you may witness sudden shifts, desperate attempts to reassert control. They may try to hoover you back in with apologies, tears, or promises of change. But these gestures are not transformation, they are survival mechanisms. The false self, gasping for psychic air, will say anything to resurrect its image. Yet the energy behind these efforts feels hollow, performative. You can sense the difference. The mask no longer fits. It has become transparent, revealing the wounded child behind it. This exposure terrifies them. The narcissist has spent their entire life avoiding vulnerability. To face their own pain feels like death, because their ego cannot differentiate between humility and annihilation. They would rather cling to the ruins of the false self than surrender to the truth of their fragility. And yet, the collapse continues. No matter how they fight it, the illusion keeps unraveling. The persona that once commanded admiration now looks desperate, even pitiful. Their words lose impact. Their manipulation loses rhythm. The spell breaks. The collapse of the false self is a psychological implosion. It is not visible to everyone because the narcissist will often wear a second mask, one of composure, detachment, or even spiritual awakening. But underneath, the identity crisis burns. They feel alienated from their own existence, disconnected from authenticity, yet unable to return to who they truly are. They have spent too long pretending. The mask became their face, and now that it falls away, they do not know what remains. In this fragile space, reality seeps in like light through shattered glass. They begin to see that the people they tried to control were never extensions of them. They begin to feel the depth of what they've lost, not only relationships, but genuine connection, empathy, intimacy. The collapse strips them bare, revealing the humanity they've denied. But instead of embracing it, they recoil, mistaking vulnerability for weakness. The narcissist does not yet understand that what is dying is not their self, but the false image that enslaved them. Every lie they told to sustain the illusion now echoes back. Every manipulation becomes a reminder of how much of their life was performance. The narcissist may spiral, seeking distractions, new admirers, or numbing behaviors, anything to avoid the truth pressing in from all sides. But there is no escape from the moment when the mask disintegrates, when the applause stops, when the mirror no longer lies. The collapse of the false self is not sudden. It is a slow unmasking of everything unreal. And in that slow unraveling, the narcissist faces the one enemy they cannot defeat with charm, control, or intellect. The truth of who they are beneath the illusion they created. There is no fury more consuming than the rage that emerges when the control slips through the narcissist's fingers. It's not the kind of anger born from disagreement or disappointment. It's existential, primal, and terrifying in its intensity. It arises when the narcissist realizes that the very source of their psychological dominance, your emotional responsiveness, has vanished. You have stopped reacting, and in doing so, you have disrupted the axis of their world. The rage that follows is not about you. It is about the crumbling illusion that they are all powerful. For the narcissist, power is not a preference. It's survival. They live in a constant state of internal fragmentation, held together only by the illusion of control. Every interaction, every conversation, every gesture is designed to confirm their superiority and to keep their fragile ego from collapsing under the weight of its own insecurity. When you stop feeding that illusion, when you refuse to argue, justify, or explain, they are forced to confront a truth they cannot tolerate, that their sense of dominance was never real, only borrowed from your participation. The moment the narcissist senses this shift, something inside them snaps. The false self, which depends entirely on your emotional compliance, begins to panic. Rage becomes the immediate defense, not because they enjoy conflict, but because anger is their last remaining tool to reassert control. Through rage, they attempt to summon your fear, your guilt, your confusion, anything that reopens the energetic loop that once kept them alive. It's not the argument they want, it's your reaction. Your emotional engagement is the oxygen they need to breathe. This rage can take many forms. Some explode outward, yelling, accusing, breaking, threatening, turning every moment into a battlefield. Others turn their fury inward, becoming passive-aggressive, cold, or eerily calm, weaponizing silence and detachment as a way to punish you for your withdrawal. The form doesn't matter. The purpose is always the same, to make you feel responsible for their chaos. If they can provoke guilt or fear, they can restore the balance of power. Because to them, emotional control equals existence. Underneath the fury lies something they will never admit: helplessness. The narcissist cannot regulate their inner world. They depend on others to do it for them. Your emotions once served as the mirror through which they managed their self-image. When that mirror stops reflecting, they feel psychologically erased. This is not metaphor. It is literal to their experience. They cannot see themselves without external validation. And when you no longer provide it, they experience that absence as annihilation. Rage becomes a desperate attempt to prove they still matter, even if it means becoming monstrous. There is also a peculiar irony in this dynamic. The narcissist's rage is the mirror image of their inner despair. Their outbursts, accusations, and cruelty are simply projections of their own powerlessness. When they call you weak, it is because they feel small. When they accuse you of betrayal, it is because they have betrayed themselves. When they say you've destroyed them, they are acknowledging a truth too painful to face, that they've lost control, not over you, but over their own illusion. The rage is an attempt to drown out that realization before it consumes them. This stage is often the most dangerous because it's when they will do anything to regain control. They may invent false narratives, smear your name, or manipulate others to see you as the villain. They may alternate between victimhood and aggression, hoping one of these masks will trigger your sympathy or shame. Every tactic, every word, every gesture is a plea disguised as domination. They are saying, please see me again, even if it's through fear. To them, your hatred is more tolerable than your indifference, because indifference is the true death of their power. As the rage intensifies, their inner disintegration becomes visible. They oscillate between explosive outbursts and eerie calmness, between grandiose self-assurance and pitiful despair. These swings reveal the psychological collapse beneath the surface, the battle between the false self that demands control and the buried self that feels abandoned and unworthy. The more powerless they feel, the more violently they try to appear powerful. It's an emotional theater of desperation where the performance masks the terror of being unseen. The narcissist's rage is never about the present moment. It's the resurfacing of ancient wounds, shame, humiliation, rejection, buried long before you ever appeared in their life. You merely became the stage on which these old battles play out. When they scream at you for disrespect, They are really screaming at the childhood memory of neglect. When they accuse you of betrayal, they are reliving the moment they felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love them. But because their ego cannot face its own fragility, they externalize it, turning every relationship into a war zone where they can reenact their unresolved pain while keeping their own vulnerability hidden. The deeper truth is that the narcissist's rage is not power, it's the collapse of it. Anger is the last defense of the disintegrating ego, a wall of fire built to protect the frightened child behind it. The louder they shout, the smaller they feel. The more they threaten, the weaker they become. Rage is not dominance, it's panic in disguise. It's the body's rebellion against the unbearable truth that control is an illusion, and that the power they thought they possessed was never theirs to begin with. This is why your calmness becomes their greatest enemy. Your refusal to engage, your emotional neutrality, your quiet detachment, all of it renders their rage impotent. Because rage has no power without reaction. The narcissist throws the fire expecting you to burn, but when you do not, the flame turns inward. They are left alone with the inferno of their own powerlessness, forced to face the emptiness they've spent their life denying. Your stillness mirrors back their lack of control, and that reflection is unbearable. Over time, their rage becomes exhausting even to themselves. They begin to sense the futility of their outbursts, yet cannot stop repeating them. Each attempt to regain control fails faster than the last. Each manipulation loses its impact. Each explosion burns them more than it burns you. They cannot understand why the old tricks no longer work, why the power they once held over your emotions has vanished into thin air. And in that confusion, they begin to spiral inward, consumed by the very rage that was meant to protect them from their own powerlessness. Every narcissist lives within a hall of mirrors, a psychological labyrinth where their own inner darkness is constantly reflected outward. To survive, they must project their insecurities, shame, and unresolved pain onto others, sculpting the illusion that they are flawless while those around them are flawed, weak, or unworthy. This is the foundation of their distorted reality. Projection is not simply a defense mechanism for them, it is the architecture of their identity. Without it, their false self collapses. But there comes a moment when that projection no longer lands, when the energy they've thrown outward turns back toward them. That moment is the inversion of projection, when the mirror finally faces them and they are forced to see what they have long denied. The narcissist spends years externalizing the contents of their unconscious. Every unwanted feeling, envy, fear, inadequacy, guilt is too unbearable to own. So they cast it onto others, accusing, criticizing, and shaming to cleanse themselves of internal conflict. When they say, "You're selfish," what they mean is, "I cannot face my own selfishness." When they say, "You're too sensitive," they're hiding from the depth of their own unhealed pain. Projection allows them to survive in a fragmented state, pretending purity, while others carry the emotional debris of their shadow. But this dynamic only works when their projections find fertile ground. When someone believes them, reacts to them, and internalizes their distortions as truth. When you awaken, when you begin to see their tactics for what they are, the mirror they've used to deflect their own darkness stops working. You no longer absorb their accusations, you see through them. You stop defending yourself against false narratives. You stop doubting your worth. And in that moment of clarity, the projection that once flowed outward begins to reverse. The psychic energy they expelled no longer has anywhere to land, so it turns inward. That's the inversion, a psychic boomerang that forces them to feel everything they've tried to make you feel. At first, they experience this inversion as confusion. They sense something shifting, but they can't name it. Their words lose power. Their manipulation doesn't land. They begin to feel an unexplainable discomfort around you, as though standing near you exposes something they can't hide. What's really happening is that your awareness has become a mirror too clear to deceive. You are no longer reflecting their illusions, you're reflecting their truth. And for the narcissist, truth is poison. When projection inverts, the narcissist faces a psychological implosion. The very emotions they've spent a lifetime avoiding begin to surface with intensity. The shame they once placed on you becomes their own unbearable companion. The fear they accused you of feeling now floods their system. The inadequacy they mocked you for now haunts them in silence. It's not that they suddenly develop empathy. It's that they are drowning in the emotions they once outsourced. They can no longer escape their shadow because the energy of denial has looped back home. The inversion of projection reveals something tragic. The narcissist's cruelty was never rooted in strength, but in terror. They projected because they could not bear to acknowledge their own darkness. Every insult, every manipulation, every accusation was an act of self-preservation. They needed someone else to carry the burden of their dissound emotions. You were never their enemy. You were their mirror. But when that mirror turns around, when it refuses to reflect their delusion, they lose the psychic buffer that once protected them from themselves. During this stage, they often lash out with renewed intensity. They will accuse you of the very things they're guilty of, not because they believe it, but because denial is the only weapon left. You will notice their contradictions. How they call you controlling while they manipulate, how they demand honesty while deceiving, how they seek pity while offering none. These contradictions expose the fracture between their inner reality and outer facade. The more they try to maintain the illusion, the faster it disintegrates. The projection loop has broken, and now their shadow consumes them from within. This inversion doesn't just bring emotional chaos, it destabilizes their identity. The narcissist's sense of self has always depended on external blame. If they are not the victim or the hero, who are they? The collapse of projection forces them into direct confrontation with that question. For the first time, they experience the loneliness they've inflicted on others. The emptiness they accused you of feeling becomes their own internal landscape. They try to escape into new relationships, distractions, or performances of superiority, but the unease follows. The truth clings to them, whispering through the cracks of their persona. What makes this process devastating for them is that they lack the psychological tools to integrate their shadow. Ordinary individuals can face guilt, reflect, and grow from it. But the narcissist's ego is too fragile to allow self-confrontation. To admit fault would mean shattering the illusion of perfection that keeps their psyche intact. So they oscillate between collapse and defense, briefly glimpsing their own darkness, then denying it more violently than before. It is an endless pendulum between awareness and avoidance. And every swing deepens their internal fragmentation. The inversion of projection is also where you begin to see the true nature of your victory. Not as revenge, but as revelation. You have stopped playing their game, and in doing so you have returned their projections to sender. You no longer carry their guilt, their shame, their fear. The energy has gone back to its source, demanding ownership. But for them, ownership feels like death. They cannot process that the monster they accused you of being was their own reflection all along. In psychological terms, this moment is the encounter with the shadow, the part of the psyche that holds everything disowned and denied. For most people, meeting the shadow is painful but transformative. For the narcissist, it is unbearable. The false self built on denial and image cannot survive the light of self-recognition. When projection inverts, the light pierces through and the false identity begins to crack. You can see it in their eyes, the panic behind the composure, the flicker of confusion behind the arrogance, the silence that follows every failed attempt at manipulation. They are no longer in control of the narrative, not even the one inside their own mind. The inversion of projection is not punishment, it is psychological balance. What was disowned returns. What was denied demands to be seen. The narcissist projections, once external shields, become internal truths, and in that reversal, they are forced into the one confrontation they have spent their entire life avoiding. The confrontation with their own reflection. Every relationship with a narcissist is an unspoken energetic transaction. They draw from your empathy the way a flame draws oxygen, subtly, continuously, and completely. You may not see it happening, but you feel it in your body, the exhaustion after every conversation, the anxiety after every interaction, the strange heaviness that lingers even when nothing obvious has occurred. What is being drained is not just your mood or motivation, it is your psychic energy, your life force, your emotional currency. For as long as you stay emotionally entangled, the narcissist thrives. But the moment you begin to pull that energy back, when you detach, disengage, and redirect your focus inward, their entire reality begins to collapse. The withdrawal of psychic energy is not an act of revenge. It is a natural correction of an energetic imbalance that has gone on too long. The narcissist depends on others to regulate their inner world. They cannot generate authentic self, worth from within. Their ego feeds on external reflection. Every word you say, every emotion you express, every reaction you give becomes psychic fuel for the false self they maintain. This is why they provoke, manipulate, and confuse. It's not random cruelty, it's extraction. Your emotional response gives them definition. Your attention makes them feel alive. Without your energy, they face the unbearable emptiness they've spent their entire life escaping. When you finally begin to withdraw, they feel it before you even say a word. It's not what you do, it's what you no longer give. You stop explaining yourself, you stop defending your intentions, you stop justifying your boundaries. You start moving in silence, and that silence has weight. For the narcissist, your emotional retreat feels like suffocation. Their world begins to lose color, their sense of control begins to fade, and a panic sets in, a deep, primal recognition that their source of psychic supply is slipping away. This is the stage where they will test every method of re-engagement. They will alternate between guilt and charm, threats and pity, chaos and calm, anything to pull your energy back into orbit. They will accuse you of being cold, ungrateful, selfish. They might pretend to change, mirroring the very self-awareness they once mocked. But beneath the performance lies desperation. What they're really saying is, please feed me again. Your energy has been their nourishment, and your withdrawal signals starvation. Psychic energy is more than emotion. It is attention, empathy, and spiritual presence combined. Wherever you direct it, life expands. When you gave it to the narcissist, their ego flourished even as you withered. When you reclaim it, you begin to regenerate. Your mind clears, your intuition strengthens. You start to feel your own essence returning. The fog that once blurred your perception begins to lift, and for the first time, you see how deeply entangled your energy had become with theirs. The narcissist senses this too, and it terrifies them. Because what they are losing is not your body or your time. It is your emotional participation in their illusion. As your psychic energy detaches, the narcissist begins to unravel. The traits they once projected, confidence, control, superiority, start to fade without your reflection to sustain them. Their grandiose self-image flickers like a dying light. They might appear calm on the surface, but internally they are in chaos. The narcissist's mind cannot tolerate the emptiness of self-awareness. They depend on the psychic connection to you to avoid the confrontation with their inner void. When that connection severs, their psyche begins to fragment. What you witness as mood swings, paranoia, or sudden outbursts is the external manifestation of their internal collapse. Energetically, this process feels like a reversal of gravity. For so long, your attention orbited around them, analyzing their moods, anticipating their reactions, interpreting their silences. Your energy revolved around their needs. But now, the direction shifts. The energy that once flowed outward begins to turn inward, returning to its rightful source. This reversal changes everything. The more you pull back, the more they feel their own emptiness expanding. The more you ground in your own center, the more unstable they become. You have broken the unspoken contract that kept their illusion alive, the agreement that your empathy would carry their shadow. When the narcissist realizes this energetic withdrawal is permanent, they often experience what feels like psychic withdrawal, a craving, an agitation, a restless search for new supply. They may attempt to recreate your energy through others, seeking someone who mirrors your sensitivity, your depth, your emotional availability, but it never feels the same, because it was never about you as a person. It was about the quality of energy you brought. You gave from authenticity, from sincerity, from love. They cannot replicate that frequency because it was never theirs to begin with. The withdrawal of psychic energy is not a moment, it's a process. It begins subtly. When you stop seeking their validation, and deepens each time you choose peace over reaction. You start to notice how they lose their composure when you don't respond. You see how their confidence fades when your gaze no longer admires them. You feel how their words fall flat when your empathy is no longer available to absorb their venom. The spell begins to break, and in its place arises a strange calm, the calm of detachment, of sovereignty, of returning to yourself. What's remarkable about this stage is that you don't need to expose them, punish them, or seek closure. The energetic shift does the work for you. The narcissist feeds on your emotional investment, and when that supply disappears, they face the emptiness they've long projected onto others. That emptiness is not new. It's simply revealed. For the first time, They must face their own energy without interference. They begin to realize that their sense of power was not inherent, but borrowed, that their confidence was not real, but reflected, that their control existed only as long as you participated in it. To them, your silence feels violent. Your peace feels like abandonment. Your calm feels like humiliation, because your detachment exposes what they have always feared, that their power was never real, and that their survival depended entirely on the energy of others. The withdrawal of psychic energy is therefore both their downfall and your liberation. As your energy returns to you, you begin to radiate differently, grounded, centered, no longer porous. The narcissist feels that shift as loss, but for you, it is the beginning of reclamation. Your stillness becomes their undoing, and your absence becomes the mirror that shows them what they have always refused to see. That without your energy, their illusion cannot exist. There comes a point after the storm, after the collapse, after the rage, after the silence, when something extraordinary begins to take form inside you. It's quiet at first, almost imperceptible, like the faint hum of electricity returning to a long, dark room. You don't feel triumphant or vengeful. You simply feel present, clear, whole. This is the rise of authentic power, not the kind that dominates or manipulates, but the kind that no one can take from you because it no longer depends on anyone else's recognition. It's the power that emerges when you stop existing as a reflection of someone else's reality and start inhabiting your own. For so long, your energy was tied to the narcissist's world, your emotions orbiting their moods, your self-worth tethered to their approval. You learn to anticipate their reactions, to soothe their insecurity, to survive their volatility. Every ounce of your psychic power flowed outward, keeping their illusion alive while draining your own vitality. When that dynamic breaks, the energy that once fueled their false self begins to return home. It doesn't rush back all at once. It seeps in gradually, restoring your center piece by piece. The confusion lifts. The fog dissolves. You begin to see not just who they were, but who you were before they rewrote your reflection. Authentic power doesn't roar. It hums with steadiness. It's not performative. It doesn't seek applause or control. It's the quiet awareness that you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone, especially to those who once thrived on making you doubt it. The narcissist's power was illusion, built on the manipulation of perception, the extraction of energy, the control of narrative. Your power, by contrast, comes from alignment, the integration of your thoughts, emotions, and boundaries into one coherent self. When those fragments reconnect, you become untouchable, not because you've built walls, but because you've become rooted. This rise is not a single moment of enlightenment. It's a gradual reawakening of self-trust. For months, maybe years, you doubted your intuition. You second-guessed every feeling. You apologized for existing too loudly, caring too deeply, sensing too clearly. Now, each time you listen to that inner voice without seeking permission, your power expands. Each time you set a boundary without guilt, your energy strengthens. Each time you choose peace over reaction, your frequency rises. Power, you realize, was never something to be gained from others. It was something to be reclaimed from the illusions that told you it was outside of you. When authentic power rises, the world responds differently. The same manipulation that once triggered you now feels transparent, almost hollow. You no longer feel compelled to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to rescue people who choose chaos over growth. You begin to move through life with discernment rather than defense. The narcissist may still hover, testing your resolve, trying to reopen the energetic door you've closed. But the difference is now internal. Their words no longer land. Their energy no longer hooks. Their approval no longer defines your value. The spell has been broken, not by confrontation, but by evolution. At its essence, authentic power is the reintegration of your psychic energy. The very energy that was once harvested by the narcissist to sustain their false self. When you withdraw it fully and redirect it inward, something profound happens. You begin to feel your own presence again. You sense the weight of your soul, the density of your awareness. The emptiness you once feared transforms into space, a space filled not with anxiety or overthinking, but with grounded clarity. For the first time, you feel safe inside your own body. That safety is power. That groundedness is freedom. This stage often brings an unexpected emotion, grief. As you rise, you begin to mourn the version of yourself who tolerated less than she deserved, who mistook chaos for love, who believed that empathy required self-abandonment. The grief is not weakness, it is purification. Every tear shed in this stage cleanses the residue of manipulation and illusion. Grief becomes the fire that burns away what was false, leaving only what is real, and what remains is resilience. The kind that doesn't need validation, the kind that stands silently in its truth, even when no one acknowledges it. You start to notice that your energy feels different now. People are drawn to your calmness, to your grounded certainty. You no longer seek connection from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. This is why authentic power cannot be exploited. It doesn't seek control, and it cannot be controlled. It radiates without attachment. It influences without trying. It attracts without chasing. Where the narcissist's power was loud and unstable, yours is quiet and immovable. It's the difference between a storm and a mountain. The rise of authentic power also awakens your discernment, that intuitive clarity that was once buried beneath confusion. You begin to sense energy before words, truth before explanation. You feel when something is misaligned, and instead of doubting yourself, you simply step back. This intuitive authority becomes your greatest defense. Though you no longer need to defend yourself, you no longer argue to prove truth, you live it. You no longer fight to be understood, you understand yourself. This is the silent revolution of awakening, the shift from external dependence to internal sovereignty. As your power rises, the narcissist's control naturally diminishes. You no longer respond to their provocations, and without your emotional participation, their manipulations fall flat. They sense the shift, the same way a predator senses when the prey no longer runs. They may still attempt to provoke, but your energy no longer offers nourishment. You have transcended the energetic dimension where they once ruled. They are still bound by illusion, but you are not. You've entered a higher state of awareness, one that no longer speaks their language of fear, shame, or control. What you begin to realize is that authentic power is not something you discover. It's something that was always there, hidden beneath conditioning, fear, and self-doubt. The narcissist didn't give you strength through their cruelty. They revealed where it was buried. Every manipulation you endured became a mirror showing you where you had forgotten your worth. Every betrayal became a doorway back to yourself. Every withdrawal of energy became an act of remembrance. The rise of authentic power is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the self that never needed to beg for recognition in the first place. And when that self stands fully awake, there is no anger left, no desire for revenge, no need for closure. There is only awareness, the awareness that what once felt like destruction was, in truth, initiation. The narcissist's collapse marked your rebirth. The silence that followed became your sanctuary. The emptiness that frightened you became your foundation. And from that foundation, authentic power rises, steady, silent, and unbreakable.